Look at the ice in your drink. You didn't think about it. You press a lever or open a tray, and there it was. Cold, clear, free. You will drink around it and throw the rest in the sink without a single thought. Now hold that image, because that piece of ice is the last survivor of one of the strangest industries in human history. An industry that once employed tens of thousands of people, that sent sailing ships across the equator, that made men rich and ruined others, and that vanished so completely most people don't know it ever existed. Before there were machines that made coal, there was an entire global business built on cutting winter into blocks and selling it to people who had never seen it. Start with the thing we forget. For almost all of human history, coal wasn't a product. It was a location and a season. If you lived somewhere with hard winter, you had ice for a few months a year, and nothing for the rest. If you lived somewhere warm, you had none. Not expensive ice, not rare ice, none. For most of the world's population, a cold drink in summer was not a luxury they couldn't afford. It was a thing that did not exist. The wealthy tried. Kings and emperors built ice houses, deep pits packed with winter snow, insulated with straw, hoping some would survive until summer. Some did. Most didn't. And even at its best, this was a rich man's trick, performed on a tiny scale, close to where the coal had fallen. Nobody moved coal. Coal stayed where it was made. Now here's where a genuinely absurd idea entered the story. In the early 1800s, a young man from Boston looked at the frozen ponds of New England and had a thought that sounds insane when you say it out loud. What if you cut the winter out of the ground, put it on a ship, and sold it to the tropics? Take something worthless, carry it thousands of miles through heat, and sell it to people who had no idea what to do with it. His own family thought it was a joke. Newspaper mocked it. The shipping merchants of Boston would not rent him a vessel because they assumed the cargo would arrive as water and sink their reputation with it. So he bought his own ship. He filled it with ice from a pond, and he sailed for the Caribbean. And here is the part people get wrong about what happened next. The voyage was a disaster, but not for the reason you're thinking. The ice arrived. Not all of it, but far more than anyone expected. The physics was on his side in a way nobody had predicted, because a large block of ice protects the ice inside it as it melts. The bigger the pile, the slower the loss. The cargo survived. The business still failed, because he arrived in a port where there was nowhere to put it, no building cold enough to store it, no shop that sold it, and worst of all, no customers who wanted it. Think about that. He had solved the impossible half of the problem and been defeated by the obvious half. People had never had cold drinks. They didn't crave what they'd never experienced. So he lost his money and he went back. And he did something clever. He started giving it away. He taught bar owners to serve drinks cold, for free, knowing that once a customer had one, a room temperature drink would taste like a mistake. He wasn't selling ice. He was manufacturing a desire that had never existed. And it worked. Within a few years, those same bar were paying for what they'd once been handed. Now the story turns into an engineering problem, and this is where it gets genuinely impressive. Cutting ice by hand was slow and wasteful. Men with saws produce uneven chunks that pack together badly, leaving air gaps, and air gaps are what kill a shipment. So the industry invented tools, a horse-drawn cutter that scored the frozen surface into a grid, like plowing a field, turning a lake into a sheet of identical rectangles. Those rectangles stack tight. with almost no space between them. Then came the insulation question, and the answer was sitting in a waste pile. Sawdust, the useless byproduct of the sawmills, free for the taking, turned out to be an excellent insulator. Pack the blocks in sawdust, build the storage houses with double walls and a gap of air between them, and the losses fell dramatically. None of this was science in the modern sense. There was no thermodynamics behind it at the start. It was the same process you've seen before in these stories. Observation, trial, failure, adjustment, repeated until the numbers worked. Once the system worked, the scale became absurd. Ships left New England loaded with frozen pond water and sailed south. They crossed the equator, not once. On the long routes, twice. 4 months at sea through the hottest water on Earth, carrying a cargo that could only lose. And they arrived with a large share of it intact. Ice cut from a lake in Massachusetts was sold in the Caribbean, in South America, and eventually in India, where it arrived to genuine astonishment. Certain lakes became brands. Ice from one particular pond was famous in London, where sellers advertised its clarity the way a wine region advertises its soil. People paid a premium for water frozen in a specific place, thousands of miles away, by a winter they had never felt. Stop and sit with that. An entire global luxury trade in something that fell from the sky for free. But this wasn't really about drinks. The cold reached into everything. Households got ice boxes, insulated wooden cabinets with a block in the top, because cold air falls. Suddenly, a family could keep food for days instead of hours. Cities got fresh milk because milk could survive the trip in from the countryside. Railroads got cool cars, which meant meat could be slaughtered in one place and eaten 1,000 miles away. Brewers could make certain beers year-round instead of only in the cold months. Fishermen could send their catch inland instead of selling it within sight of the water. Doctors used it to bring down fevers. Read that list again. Every one of those is a piece of the modern food system. And all of it arrived before anyone had built a machine that could make coal. It ran on sawdust, horses, sailing ships, and winter. You would think this is where the story ends. The problem is solved. Humanity moves coal around the world. Except it didn't end here, because the ice tray had 2 problems hidden inside it, and both of them were fatal. Here is the uncomfortable truth about natural ice. It is exactly as clean as the water it was cut from. Nothing more. Freezing pushes some impurities out, but it is not purification. Whatever is in the lake is, to a real degree, in the block. And now think about what was happening to lakes and rivers during exactly this period. Cities were growing at a speed nothing had prepared them for. Sewage went into the water. Factory waste went into the water. Runoff from streets and stables went into the water. The same century that built the ice trade was busy fouling the water the ice trade depended on. So a product sold as pure, advertised as clean, packed into drinks and pressed against sick bodies, was being harvested from water that was getting worse every year. Doctors began raising the alarm. Some outbreaks of illness were traced, or at least strongly suspected, to contaminated ice. And the industry's defense was mostly branding. The clarity of the block, the reputation of the lake, not a test, not a measurement, a story about where it came from. The other flaw was more obvious, and somehow nobody wanted to look at it. The entire industry depended on winter, not on labor or capital or ingenuity, on weather. A cold winter meant a thick harvest and a good year. A mild winter meant thin ice, or no ice at all. And mild winter happened. When they did, The result had a name: an ice famine. Prices spiked, supply collapsed. Businesses that had built themselves around cheap coal found themselves with none, in the middle of summer, with no possible substitute. Imagine running a business where your only supplier is the temperature outside, who signs no contracts, gives no warning, and can simply decline to deliver for a year. That was the ice trade. Enormous, global, sophisticated, and standing on something no one could control. The replacement had been developing quietly for decades. Machines that produce coal through compression and evaporation, making ice from whatever water you fed them, in any climate, in any month. And at first, people didn't want it. Manufactured ice was seen as artificial, suspicious, inferior to the honest stuff cut from a lake. The natural ice industry leaned hard on that feeling, selling purity and nature against the coal made by a machine. Then the argument flipped, and it flipped on exactly the two weaknesses we just described. Machine ice could be made from clean filtered water, which meant it was often safer than ice sought from a river downstream of a city. And machine ice didn't care what the winter did. The very things that had made natural ice romantic, that it came from nature, that it came from a place, that it fell from the sky, became the reasons it lost. Nature couldn't be trusted to be clean, and nature couldn't be trusted to show up. What happened next was fast. Within roughly a generation, an industry that had shipped winter across oceans was essentially gone. The great ice houses along the river were abandoned and eventually burned or collapsed. The horse-drawn cutters became museum curiosities. The lakes that had been famous for their ice went back to being ordinary lakes. And the strangest part is how completely it was forgotten. This was not a small trade. It employed tens of thousands. It shaped ports, railways, and diets. It put coal in the hands of ordinary people decades before electricity did. And today it survives almost nowhere in public memory except as a piece of trivia about ships full of melting cargo.